All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Arts for LA's public comment webinar. We really appreciate you registering through Zoom and taking the time out of your day to join us. I am Ricky Abalez, the Director of Policy and Advocacy with Arts for LA. My pronouns are they, them, and I will be leading the webinar this morning. So before we get started, I wanted to walk through some community agreements for our engagement today. First and foremost, we want to ensure that all voices will be valued, heard, and respected by the group. Our diverse range of experiences with public comment will be honored during our Q&A following the presentation. The chat can be used to track pending questions, so please list your name and question in the chat if you so desire throughout the presentation. And Yamili, our programs associate, will be tracking those questions for you and creating a queue so we can make sure we get to you. Questions and comments should remain under 1.5 minutes just to ensure that everyone on the call has time to engage. And comments, if they were to run over, we will use the mute function just so that everybody does get to have their voice heard. And if we don't have a ton of questions and someone wants to follow up, there is definitely space for that. Is that something we can all agree to? Cool. Okay. So our agenda today will include a presentation on how to offer comment and the process in which you can take to find information. I will walk through some examples just to make sure that we are touching base on all the items that I walk through during the presentation, because I think it can get a little confusing. Then we will have our Q&A, and we also have a spillover doc. So if you don't get to ask a question that comes to mind, you can put it in that document after the meeting, and I will reach out to you personally via email in the coming days. And before we get started, I just want to play this video for you of myself offering public comment, so you have an idea of what that looks like.
Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Ricky Abalez. I am here with Arts for LA, and I wanted to thank Supervisor Solis and Horvath for introducing this motion. As we've heard, arts organizations are severely undercapitalized, and this is concerning because we leaned on and relied on the arts all throughout the pandemic for entertainment and for empowerment. The arts help us feel seen, but unfortunately, artists and arts workers so often feel unseen, having to work multiple part-time jobs just to pay the bills, and not having sustainable work. I've been one of those artists before, and as much as artists provide to our community, they deserve to be provided for in return. This is especially true for historically underrepresented communities of color, and it's imperative that we invest in creative communities by introducing sustainable jobs with a median entry-level living wage. I encourage your unanimous support of this motion, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so what is public comment? It's an opportunity for members of the public to offer input on projects, laws, policies, or processes that impact them and the communities that they serve. And why should you participate? Because offering comment is an essential part of a healthy and civically engaged society. Using your lived experience and telling your personal stories can actually compel elected officials to make community-driven decisions. We've seen this happen a lot at Arts for LA, and stories are what matter most to elected officials when they're deciding how to vote on an item. I know that public comment, for those of you who have heard of it, can be a little overwhelming. I know when I first started doing it, I was very stressed and anxious about it. And so hopefully these steps can help alleviate some of that stress and anxiety. First and foremost, you want to find information about the board or council meeting that you want to attend. And we do have helpful links at the end of this presentation that you can follow. This slide deck will be shared out with you once we've ended the webinar, so no worries there. You'll have those resources moving forward. Some of the things you want to find when you're going to attend a meeting are obviously the date and time. Sometimes meetings will be held virtually, and you can certainly tune in virtually whenever you'd like. So you'll want to look for the Zoom link or YouTube link And if you're going in person, you'll want the address and most importantly, the parking info. If anyone wants to or has offered comments to the Board of Supervisors, parking can be really confusing downtown. So that information is super important. You'll also want to understand the engagement details, and that will vary depending what body you're going to engage with. For example, Board of Supervisors of LA County has very different engagement details than City Council. City Council will often have general comment periods where you can comment on anything that you're passionate about in your community, whereas the Board of Supervisors doesn't do that as frequently, and you have to stick to agenda items that are on their list. But Google will never fail you if you're curious what those details and rules are. Secondly, you want to prepare your public comment. It's definitely easier and less anxiety inducing if you come prepared to speak on certain topics than to try to wing it because you have such limited time. So some questions that can help guide you are, who are you? What do you want? Why do you care about this topic? Why should we care about this topic? And why now? What makes this time unique? Third, you want to attend the meeting or submit written comment in advance. So a lot of folks don't know that if you can't attend a meeting or view it online, you can actually write comment and send it in through their public comment website, which is also attached at the end of the slide deck. And then fourth, you want to tell your story. That is the most important part of your comment, is why you showed up today, why you learned to be so passionate about the topic that you showed up for, and why it matters to you. And then lastly, stay involved, not just with Arts for LA, but with your communities. It's so important to remain civically engaged. All right, how do we get started? Well, you want to be sure that you thank your public officials, especially if one or a couple of them have authored the legislation that you might be addressing. It's really important to start off your comment with that. And if you're speaking on behalf of an organization like Arts for LA, you want to be sure to address that. So for example, as you heard me say, I'm Ricky Ablez and I'm here with Arts for LA. It's that simple. And then you'll be asked which item you're speaking on. So when you look at the agenda for City Council, Board of Supervisors, or a school board, they'll be numbered, and that is your agenda item. So let's say you're looking at something for arts education and it's listed as number 6. You would say, I'm going to be speaking on agenda item 6. Narrative building. So what makes public comment compelling? You want to be very clear about who you're serving and the issue that you're speaking on. So for example, I'm here to speak about the lack of access to arts education for youth of color in the San Gabriel Valley. Very specific. And then you want to use your lived experience to explain why the topic matters to you. And so this is actually very personal to me, and I used my story. I grew up in a low-income community where few arts opportunities were available. I wasn't exposed to the arts until I was in high school, and we had one arts teacher, and our theater was in the cafeteria with plastic foldable chairs. And so then you want to tie the issue and your story to other social dilemmas and or benefits. In this case, we could say arts education is not only an opportunity for self-expression, it's proven to increase student achievement, mental health, and civic participation. So that's the beginning of your comments. And then what is your ask? You'll hear this a lot in politics. You don't want to go into a meeting with an elected official or a public hearing without knowing what you're going to ask them for. So you want to be very clear to that decision-making body what you want them to do. For example, it is essential that the LA County Board of Supervisors direct the county CEO to invest $1.5 million in the Arts Education Collective to help achieve equitable arts instruction in school districts across the region. I know that seems like a lot and it may seem overwhelming. The good news here is if you're reviewing the agenda, you'll likely have your talking points listed in that agenda or in the motion that you're speaking on, so you'll know what you're asking them to do. You'll be asking them to support the motion or policy or to oppose it, right? Okay, now planning. This is so important. I've seen so many folks try to offer comment without planning, and it does become very stressful. And then you'll often go over time. So write out a script for yourself. And it doesn't have to be a paragraph, a monologue, unless that's something that you like for yourself. If you're an actor, you might want to write a monologue. But it can be 2 to 5 sentences or a bulleted list of talking points. That's what I do for myself. So it does still allow for some improv. Pocket data. So you should definitely keep a note on your phone for striking data points that you read about in articles, that you hear about from friends you're talking to on a day-to-day basis. Some pocket data points that I have on my phone are 9 out of 10 schools in California fail to offer ongoing sustainable arts programming. And that's really striking. Elected officials have been appalled when they hear that. Another one is LA is #1 in arts providers per capita, but number 259 in government support for the arts in funding allocation. So those are just some examples. They don't have to be that detailed. If you find it interesting, it's important to make sure that you're tracking it. Also, pocket stories. This doesn't just mean your stories, but the stories you hear from other artists and arts workers in the field. What about their story is compelling to you? Now, we want to maintain, confidentiality, so you wouldn't share their names, but it's perfectly fine to say, I've spoken to arts workers in the field, and here are the things they're saying. That's really compelling, and it really helps advocacy efforts. And then practice. While you're starting out, if you've never offered public comment before, it's so important to practice at home a couple of times. Especially because you'll often only have 1 to 2 minutes to offer comment at a hearing or a public meeting. And that time goes by really quickly. So you want to ensure you're staying within those boundaries. How are we feeling? I know I'm moving a bit quickly. Okay. Now, there are different ways to offer comment. Again, you can go in person. And if you are going to go in person, I highly recommend you be on time, because public hearings last so long as it is, especially for something like the County Board of Supervisors. They have a lot of items to get through, and they're already there from about 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So they stay on a strict schedule. If you know that your item is going to come up during the day at a certain time, you want to be there. Additionally, again, you only have 1 to 2 minutes to speak. I have found recently that really you only have 1.5 minutes. The last time I saw 2 minutes allotted to folks for public comment was last year. So it's just something to be aware of. And then, of course, remote. If you want to offer comment from your office or your home, maybe you have a family and you can't leave the house because you have to take care of your kids. You can still offer comment from the comfort of your home. And so you would call in to the meeting. And this can get a little confusing because you need more information. And I'll walk you through that in a little bit. But you'll get the phone number and the access code, and then you'll be added to the queue. You don't need to mute yourself. They mute you on your behalf. And then they'll call your name when it's your time to speak. And again, you'll have 1 minute to 1.5 minutes. And then you can submit written comment online. You could even do both. I've done that where I've written a comment online, submitted it, and then I've gone in person just to kind of double down. Okay, so I couldn't capture all of the different opportunities for comment in this webinar because you might all live in different areas across the county. That being said, I've included a lot of links here for the Board of Supervisors and LA City Council. And then I'll walk you through this link, which can help you find your representatives if you don't know where to begin. Maybe you don't know who your school board members are, or you don't know who your city council person is. So first, I'm going to walk through the LA County Board of Supervisors calendar. This will be super helpful for you because it's going to show you when their meetings are and when they're open to the public. We'll look at August. And you'll see that all of their meetings take place on Tuesday. And it tells you they start at 9:30 a.m. Sometimes you'll see that it says closed session, so that's not open to the public. but a regular board meeting and public hearings are. That's the calendar. Just go here. Then here's a link to their agenda page. This is going to be your best friend. Remember that access code I told you about? If you want to call in from the comfort of your home or your office, this is what you would call into. And it's also listed on their agenda. I'm going to go to this one. Here's an agenda for the Board of Supervisors if you've never seen it. There is a lot of information here, 57 pages. A good thing to do if you are overwhelmed by the number of items in here is Command F, type in arts, and see what comes up. Yeah. So this is a motion that was just passed by the Board of Supervisors that we helped provide insight on. And it's in support of the entertainment industry workers who are affected collaterally by the strikes. And I'm going to open the motion because this is a summary of the motion. If you want to read the full motion, it's listed here. So what you'll see in a motion first is background on the item. So you don't always have to read these. Like if you are a part of SAG-AFTRA, if you're a part of WGA, you might already know the history and why a strike is so important, right? If you feel you don't have that information at your fingertips, I definitely encourage you to read through the background. Otherwise, you could just scroll to the bottom and you'll look at the area that says, "We therefore move." This is what we call directives. And this is what the Board of Supervisors is telling other government bodies, or in some instances, community-based organizations, what they expect them to do. So here you'll see they're directing the chief executive officer of the county to send a 5-signature letter from the Board of Supervisors to the AMPTP in support of SAG-AFTRA and their position in negotiations, encouraging AMPTP to start negotiations again. And they did the same thing with WGA about 2 months ago. And then they're directing the director of the Department of Economic Opportunity to work with the Department of Arts and Culture and the County Film Office to identify ways in which local government can support entertainment industry workers who are affected by the strikes. And then you'll see here to discover the impact on the direct, indirect, and induced employment and earnings, and information indicating how many businesses impacted by the strike are sole proprietors, et cetera, et cetera. And they have 30 days to report back with this information. So when you read those directives, what you'll decide for yourself is, do you support what the Board of Supervisors are directing these bodies to do, or do you oppose it? And then you would go into your meeting, you would say, I'm speaking on, where did the agenda go? Oh, let me pull it up again. I'm speaking on agenda item number 4, and I encourage you to oppose the item, or I encourage you to support the item, and you will explain why. Hope that's making sense. That's the County Board of Supervisors. Here is the link to submit written comment if you don't want to call in or can't attend in person, and you will fill out all this information and you'll click on the item you're speaking on. This is a different agenda, but you get the point. And then LA City Council, it's very similar. Their calendar and agendas are included on the same page, but pretty self-explanatory, gives you the date, the agenda. They look fairly similar, so I don't need to walk you through it. Oh, it downloaded as a PDF. There it is. So number 1, number 2, you get the point. And then if you don't know where to start, there's this link. And you'll enter your address. This is not my address, so sorry, you won't find me if you go here. But you'll enter your address and you'll find your officials, and it'll list your federal officials, state level, Board of Supervisors, LA City, Metro Board, and it goes all the way down, LA Unified, so you know who you're speaking to. And if you're calling on your particular official to do something, it's easier to know who they are. Okay. Some other resources for you. If you're speaking on behalf of an organization like Arts for LA, often you'll receive talking points. So you don't have to do a lot of this work on your own. That might look like this. We'll list the meeting details for you, why you're attending, what you're speaking on, the dial-in instructions if you can't go in person. And this does get complicated. We've had people get a little confused. So one thing I want to address is when it says here, press 1 and 0, that could be very confusing. And we try to list, once you've pressed those numbers, don't touch the phone again, because what will happen is you'll be kicked out of the queue and they won't see your name. And you don't want that to happen. So just follow the directions to a T. And then we list suggested talking points here as well. We list it in a way where you could just read it word for word and be good. And I make sure we time it too, so that it stays within 1 to 2 minutes. But I also encourage people to replace some of these items, embellish it, add your own flair. That's always more compelling than reading from the talking points we provide. All right. There's also a resource here for you where Create California walks you through how to offer comment for school board meetings in particular, because there are a few nuances. So I encourage you to all look through this on your own time. School boards have become a very important piece of advocacy at the local level, as I'm sure you all know. There are a lot of anti-queer policies in particular being introduced. So I know I've tapped into school board meetings a lot more recently than I have in the past. All right, I want to show you one more example of a public comment, and it's a unique example. It's one of our Activate delegate alumni, and instead of speaking her comment, she sang. So here we go.
The Empire State invests $2.31 per capita in arts and culture. The land of 10,000 lakes, over $6 whole per capita in arts and culture. So how does the largest creative economy in the US measure up? It might come as a shock. California funds a paltry 73 cents per capita in arts and culture. The Golden State ranks not even silver or bronze per capita in arts and culture. Let's bring it up to $1, supporting a one-time increase from 26 to 40 million for the California Arts Council. Invest in arts and culture for sustainable communities, for resilient economies, for a better recovery.
Woohoo! Joyce is amazing. And we encourage that too. We have been told by the Board of Supervisors and some city council members that that's really exciting to them. And they do kind of perk up to imagine hearing comments offered for the last hour and a half that are all speaking, and then you get someone singing you a song. It's pretty cool. So it doesn't have to be a boring thing. And then here is our spillover doc, where you will list your name, your question, and your email so that I can get back to you if we don't get to answer your questions now. That is our presentation. So I just want to remind everyone that we have a queue for questions. We'll follow that queue, and if we have follow-ups after and there's time, I'll go back to answering any other things that come up. Yamili, who's first on the list?
We haven't had any submissions yet,
Oh, great.
so we can start collecting our first.
Yeah,
comment
then I'll just
now.
open it up. Do any folks have questions on what's been presented today or something that I may have missed that you want to know about? Fabiola, am I seeing your hand up? Okay, great. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to get the digital hand up. Hi, I'm Fabiola Prieto, she, her, hers. This is more of a recommendation, suggestion. I've been part of a neighborhood council, and I feel that that's also a very good place to come and advocate for the arts, especially when it comes to micro grants that maybe artists can get for maybe a mural or something related that is very hyper local. And I was wondering why it wasn't included. It would be a great resource even for practicing. Me, for example, I have a hard time speaking in public, but these very small forums really help me, get my practice out when it comes to advocacy.
Thank you for bringing that up. You're absolutely correct. I think it's a great way to engage. And because you brought that up, what I'll add to this slide deck is a resource that helps you find who your neighborhood council members are. So thank you for bringing that up, Fabiola. And I'm so happy you're participating in one. That's awesome. Yes, is it Martian?
Hi, Martian DeLellis. I'm also on a neighborhood council, and I find it confusing, like all of the categories of people from our House of Representatives and Senator to whatever Laura Friedman is here, to the 15 city council members, to the LA County of Supervisors. And I just wish there was like a chart for people and that they made information more accessible without a million acronyms so that everyday people could get more involved. So that's one thought. The other is I went to the Arts Lobbying Day in at the State House with my company, Los Angeles Performance Practice, and they said there was a $1 billion bill from Portofino for art teachers and artists doing social practice. But what I wish there was somebody advocating for just artists making art as well, because we did do a research study, and a few years ago, LA was 900 and something in state dollars, and now I think we're in the 200s, and we just need support for actual artists and not artists that help you do better at math, or artists like, I mean, that's great, but just people that contribute to the quality of life and how to articulate that case, I'm wondering about too. So if you have any thoughts on that, I'm curious.
I really appreciate you bringing all these items up. It definitely can be confusing to track our representatives and how to engage them. The folks that I've included on the slide deck, those are the folks that you're gonna have easiest access to in terms of speaking publicly to address items they're introducing on the local level. Laura Friedman, who you brought up, is a state assemblywoman. So it is harder to offer comment to things that she might be voting on, because obviously, they're all out in Sacramento. So the best way to contact someone like her would be via email or to set up a meeting with her local office. And probably what would end up happening, and I could help you look for those emails too. If you reach out to me, I can introduce you to some folks. What'll end up happening is one of her legislative deputies or a field representative will meet with you either on Zoom or in person, whatever is best for you, and kind of take your concerns and thoughts down for Laura Friedman and then report back to her. So it is a little harder to engage directly with an elected representative when they're at the state level or the federal level. So I'm glad you brought that up. The link that I showed you where you type in your address and you see who your representatives are, that's a good way to start too. If you click on their names, their contact info will pop up. And then on the items you brought up, I also was at the State Advocacy Day. I'm really happy you went. There are many bills that were introduced for the arts that Some of them got passed, great. Prop 28, you know, it's been funded. Prop 28, for those of you who don't know, is money for arts and music in schools. So every school district will be able to incorporate arts programming. And 80% of those funds will have to be spent on hiring teachers or training teachers. We're waiting on guidance and specifics on how that's going to be implemented, but it's exciting that the funding is there. I think it's going to make a huge difference in schools. But to your point, Martian, that yes, definitely we need more policies that address individual artists and arts workers and supporting them. Some people doing work on that are the Entertainment Community Fund. Not sure if you've heard of them, but I would encourage you to touch base with them. They are doing a lot to help arts workers who are struggling because of the strikes, including the actors and writers who are on strike and trying to get money in their pockets. I know they're sending out resources for folks to get free food at some food drives during this difficult time. They also just opened a affordable housing building for specifically artists. Granted, it's only 151 units, which is not nearly enough for the number of artists in the creative capital of the world, but they do have funding to open more of those housing units across the county. So it'd be good to stay looped in with what they're working on. I would also encourage everyone to sign up for Californians for the Arts newsletter. They are a great organization that stays tapped into state level arts policy and will send you an email on how you can write a letter or stay involved to make sure that those policies get passed. So those are some ways to stay engaged and be part of the push to make sure artists are seen and heard.
I guess thank you. That what I'm trying to say too is that I would like to see more monies going directly to artists, like the Creative Capital Award, but 100 times as much funding for 100 times more people or whatever. And it's way easier to make a case that like having art in schools raises math scores, and you can see that in graphs. But I guess I'm more interested in how to brainstorm making the case to politicians that there's a value in art, period, and that we just need it. And like, what numbers can we use, or like to speak their language and to make it actionable and all that.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying. Yes. Narrative change. We talk about this a lot. I think the best way to make your case, first and foremost, is to show up for public comment, like genuinely. We've heard from local elected officials that it hurts to say this out loud every time because I don't believe it, but it's what we've heard, is that artists aren't loud enough with their needs. And I think what they mean by that is that they don't hear from us enough in situations like public comment. And it's hard to stay tapped into things like that because so much happens on a day-to-day basis and we're just trying to live our lives. So again, stay tapped into organizations like ours and Californians for the Arts. And, you know, you and I could even set something up where maybe we check in once a month and I can help connect you with opportunities like that. And I can also send over data points in this slide deck if that would help everyone. You know how I brought up pocket data, pocket stories. I'm happy to add a slide with many different data points that you can kind of start off with, because we have a lot. I think the most compelling one recently has been, we're #1 in arts providers. We're 259 in government funding, because city officials don't know that. They have no idea that, again, in the creative capital of the world, we're not funding the arts. Florida is ahead of California in publicly funding the arts. So it is a case to be made, as well as helping elected officials understand the stories. A lot of them think when we talk about actors, we're referring to Tom Cruise, Meryl Streep, name dropping people. But making that case that no, actor means me too. and I do background work on a day-to-day basis. You know, I make $125 a day doing that. That's my livelihood. I've had actors come to public comment and say before, I've made $27,000 this year. And I think that is really striking and compelling to an elected official who doesn't understand what it's like to live as an artist in LA. So personal stories matter just as much as data points do. I hope that helps. I do want to move on to Nancy just to make sure we get to other people, but thank you for bringing that up, and I'll add that slide. Nancy?
I'm going to comment quickly, if you don't mind too, Martian, that there are various grants set up for individual artists, but the California Arts Council, who administrates such, sometimes will spend a year looking for the top 50 legacy artists, people who are over 50 who have been doing it their whole lives. And you'll see people who have run dance companies for years walk away with nothing, and someone else that's the hot playwright that year might walk away with something. So there are programs out there, but they don't happen on a consistent basis for individual artists as much as we'd like. I will just make a couple of comments. I think I'm preaching to the choir looking at the names here. I've been in meetings with most of you, but if you are doing public comment, sometimes you can add a minute by using the word that you would like to make a general comment afterwards. Sometimes you'll be instructed that by, say, your Arts for LA briefing points. And if you can, it's a good thing you've got a little overload, practice it for a minute. But if you've got a few extra seconds, you can say, I hope this is compelling to all of you to take a stand and do whatever, and that call to action. Lastly, I'll suggest, rearrange the talking points in the order that it makes matter to you, because, everyone reading from the same script gets kind of, oh, we've already heard it. So whatever the most compelling call to action for you, besides, introducing yourself, can make a big difference in the way they hear that material. I've tag teamed with a few people from LA from the arts, and we even got press publicity for something that was arts for out of county, in county, but on rural areas, trying to get money for those areas. Anyway, I think Arts for LA does great work. I look forward to getting the handout because it always helps to know your officials. And that song was actually in a meeting with one of those officials, as a panel. So good fun to hear Joyce again. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. I really appreciate all your comments. Absolutely agree with Nancy. It's always more compelling to adjust talking points to fit your story because they don't want to hear the same thing over and over again, but they're there to support you, the talking points. What we do at Arts for LA, and you'll see us do in the future, we'll probably call on you to assist, is we'll build a story with the people who are going to speak. So let's say there's 50 of us. We'll make sure that we're telling an overarching story as opposed to telling the same story 50 times. Hope that makes sense. But if you're doing it on your own, I think participating in group efforts or with an organization is a good way to learn how to offer comment, so that if you want to go do it on your own for issues outside of the arts, you feel confident in doing that. I do want to note real quick, and then I'll go back to some questions. There are opportunities coming up to offer comment. This is also on the slide deck. We have our supplemental budget coming up on the county level this fall in October. So there will be an opportunity to offer comment there, as well as on October 17th. We have a report back to the County Board of Supervisors on our Creative Jobs Initiative, which will include recommendations to the board. And to have support for those recommendations would be really helpful. So you'll probably hear from us if you're signed up for our newsletter. And then lastly, we do have a page for action alerts. And I can drop that into the chat in a second. And that's an opportunity to send letters to the Board of Supervisors, sign on to petitions. Right now we have a one-click letter going to the Board of Supervisors to thank them for passing the motions in support of SAG-AFTRA and WGA, and to also encourage them to prioritize artists moving forward. So those are just some opportunities on the horizon. Any other questions or comments? Nancy.
I'm sorry to do this ad for the Entertainment Community Fund, but this Saturday from 10 to 2, if you are interested in arts in education, they are doing their annual symposium on teaching artists, which, Martian, I know you're saying I don't really care necessarily that arts helps people with math, but believe it or not, some of the best mathematicians and engineers in the world grew up playing instruments. So there is kind of a connection that they look for, but that seminar is from 10 to 2. And if you just look up Entertainment Community Fund, you can find the information on that particular webinar. It's all virtual. You can come and go as you like, but you will hear from fascinating people who do work in the industry. It does pay well if you can get consistent work. I did it for a year, but I could only put together a couple of hours of instruction, and that was during the early parts of the pandemic. Thanks for listening, but do take a look if that's something that interests you. Thank you.
Martian.
I just wanted to clarify that I do care that art helps people with math. I'm just saying that there aren't enough direct funds to artists. The company that I work for is administering the California Arts Council's individual fellowship, and there needs to be more money for that and more people that can get legacy grants, but we don't have control over what the state gives us except at the lobbying level. And then my second comment is that sitting on the other side of the table as a Silver Lake Neighborhood Council member, I think there should be more trainings on how to make a point in 1 minute, or like we should rehearse our points. And I noticed I've only been doing it for a couple of years, but it does, a lot of people come and just like yell about something and don't really have an ask, or the ask is something beyond our control, like we can't move traffic, or I mean, we can advocate for that, and I'm doing that in my own neighborhood, but so I guess the research, and then just the like, I just don't think scolding is a good tactic. I'm just saying that we need to come up with more flavors, like besides making people feel bad. So I think there's like numbers, there's telling personal stories, but I guess also like on the emotional level, like how do we make our message compelling too?
Yeah, I love your use of the word flavors. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And I agree. To your point about needing more opportunities to learn about how to offer comment in 1 minute and trainings on that. I hope that this training has been helpful, and we definitely plan to offer more things like this in the future. We see that there's a need for it. And this will be posted to our YouTube channel. So, you know, by all means, share this training with friends, colleagues. I know we're coming up on time here, so I just want to check Ayan, Cynthia, Maria, Sox, Jenny, Melba, Rael. Do any of you have any comments or questions before we leave? No? All right. Oh, I got one in here. Is there a resource similar to this webinar and slide deck that I could share with someone unfamiliar with public comment to quickly educate them? If a coworker, friend, or family member expresses concern about a pressing topic and wants to make a difference, I want to direct them to public comment. I see. Yes, you know what? I can also include that in our list of resources in the slide deck, so that if you do want to share opportunities for public comment and trainings on that with folks who may not be tapped into the arts, you can do that as well. Learned about this webinar through VPE. Amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for attending this webinar. I hope you found it useful. I will update that slide deck with data points and additional resources. I will also link to the websites for Entertainment Community Fund and Californians for the Arts, since I name dropped them. And then you will get that slide deck in the next few days. You might also get a follow-up survey so that we can see whether this webinar did help you increase your knowledge base on public comment. Have an incredible rest of your week and take care of yourself.